What is up, Rad Potential YouTube? Mr. Rad here, and we're back with the hybrid RX8. As you saw in the last video, the thing fired right up, even whenever I didn't really want it to. We wanted to prime the oil system, and well, it just wants to run, right? So we're ready to basically take this thing for its first test drive. So I haven't started it since the other video. I've put water in it. It's basically the exact next moment in time from that video after a slight sleep from me, and this thing's ready to rock. The mid pipe, I completed all of that before I took it off the lift, just connected into the factory resonator, so you guys and me are gonna get to hear this thing for the first time with the full exhaust on in this video. Let's jump right into it. We're gonna fire this thing up, listen to how this thing sounds, and hopefully I can keep my white Hawaiian shirt from getting dirty. Like the last video, it basically changed to dark blue after the video. Ideally, no throttle input required to fire this thing up. We're just gonna hit it. We'll adjust some things in the Versatuner to let this car idle higher, in addition to adjusting some of the fueling settings later. So stay tuned. It should still start and run. This isn't like too far crazy off that this ECU shouldn't be able to account for it. So let's hit it. I've got an exhaust leak. My guess on the exhaust leak, it's probably the RX8 manifold gasket and the 13B manifold gasket interface. Cutting everything down to fit in there. There's no off-the-shelf hybrid gasket. So I think I might have to get some sort of a sealant or something to put in there, some RTV red or something like that, because that's 100% where it's leaking, and this thing sounds bad. It's figuring itself out though. Got good oil pressure, coolant temps coming up. We'll get a heat cycle on this thing. We'll investigate the exhaust leak, take it for a rip. Well, I've got a water leak coming from above the OMP. Fine. And I can't visibly see a major black splatter from exhaust. That looks like it's just the upper coolant line, which is an easy adjustment of a hose clamp or something, and that should be fixed. Well, I figured that ginormous flange wouldn't exactly be the easiest thing to seal up, especially with the gaskets being cut to fit, because there's no custom deal for that. So I might have to get some sort of a sealant and try again, which is real unfortunate. But we'll let this cool down and I'll take it apart. Upon my intent to remove the header, I actually found a couple loose bolts, so I'm curious if maybe the heat cycle, getting things warm, getting things cool, if that didn't help. So I went ahead and just snugged, cranked, tightened every one of the bolts down again. We're going to fire this back up and see if it still sounds complete and utterly atrocious. So we'll just hop up in here. Don't worry, we're not that high off the ground. We'll know pretty much instantly if it sounds just as terrible as it did before. Still sounds terrible. It's definitely leaking right between the header and the engine, right at the center iron. So I'm going to pull that off. We're going to look at my gasket. I've got another Renesis engine sitting over here, so we'll mock it up on this other Renesis engine. Make sure nothing's interfering. It is, like I said earlier, two separate gaskets all chopped up to try to fit together. They probably do vary in thickness a little bit, so I bet that's what's giving us our fits. At a minimum, we will throw some sealer on it, slap it back on there, and hope the glue holds. Technology is so annoying. I had so many great one-liner jokes about trying to get this dumb header off and what it required. I laid under the car, I smashed on it, I pried on it, I did the whole deal. Now I've got a ratchet strap pulling the engine and transmission that way so I can pull this off. I had to pull one of the studs out so that way they weren't in the way, and now I've got it to where... Oh, come on. You were just ready to come off. It's going to come off, I think. Maybe I spoke too soon. Maybe it's not ready to come on. Ha! I win! Well, if that dumb microphone wouldn't have quit working, we'd have been good. and y'all have heard all my funny jokes. But for now, this thing's off. Let's look at the gaskets. Alright guys, so here's my problem with this whole deal that I've got going on right now. I had to cut the RX8 metal gasket that I had from this car in order to fit the RX7 gaskets in there. So the gasket I use for the RX7 is like an REW gasket, and they're like the super nice, they're really expensive, multi-layer steel. These are the best ones you can effectively use. So I've taken it and I've trimmed it down such that the REW gasket fits just within the housings, and then the RX8 gaskets fit just within the iron. But as we saw whenever I fired it up, we definitely still had exhaust leaks, which is not ideal. In addition, the center of the RX8 multi-layer steel gasket is actually held together by all the sides. So when you cut the center out, you get 4 separate pieces. So I think this is effectively not the best way to do this, and I need to go back to the drawing board when it comes to sorting out a gasket, because they're close in thickness, but I believe that the REW gaskets are actually a bit just slightly thicker. Feeling where this thing was leaking with my hands up in there when it was running earlier. So yeah, I don't think any level of like just me shoving a bunch of exhaust gasket silicone on there is going to fix this, or necessarily be like the best value of putting forth my time right now into, making the hybrid 100% reliable and drivable, which is terrible because I don't think my local parts store is going to have any universal gasket material that I could just make one big gasket for this whole deal. So we're pretty much just stuck until parts come in, which seems to be a pretty typical story for the hybrid. So this is effectively how all of this stuff fits together. So you can see just like that, just like that. We've got, I'll just grab one of them, or 2 or 12. And the center one fits in here like that. And we got to get everything not to touch. Then you got the next one, go in there just like that. And then we've got the other end one that goes in here just like that. And now you have a 5-piece gasket for our 5-piece runner, for our 5 exit into 1 crazy exhaust for our weird hybrid engine here. I think this is not conducive to sealing. Back to the drawing board. I'm making a hybrid work because it's not as straightforward as the internet makes it seem, or even as I've been trying to make it seem, because honestly, I didn't think this was going to be that complex. I was like, oh, I'll just cut the gasket apart. It'll go right on there. Bam, bam, bam. Tighten her down. Big exhaust leak. So that's exactly how that went. But what I want to show you guys right now, I've actually got a rotor and a housing and a front iron set up over here. And let's look at the port timing of the hybrid. So we're going to see which ports open first, and kind of give you my thoughts on why this exhaust manifold is designed like this, in addition to why I kept the 5th runner separate, because there's some things I want to test, and maybe you guys will agree, and I want to get your guys' thoughts on what stuff you want to see tested in the hybrid exhaust. I have found a solution. So in the small town where I live now, there's not a whole bunch of big box parts stores where you can go and basically just pick up whatever you need. I don't think I have a place locally around here that stocks -6 AN fittings. So to be able to find some metal, universal, cut your own exhaust gasket material, let's just say I went to 5 different part stores in all of the towns around me before I found this. So I'm stoked to have this now, because I don't have to end this video without us driving the car, ideally. So I'm going to take this, we're going to cut out the hybrid manifold flange on this deal, and we're going to put this on the car with a significant amount of the JB Weld exhaust gas sealant. Hopefully the exhaust sealant helps hold this gasket together. This does have, a metal mesh on the inside, but rotaries tend to just destroy exhaust gaskets, even if they're like the factory Mazda ones. So we're going to go ahead, and hopefully this gets us a lot closer than my mismatched stack of crazy exhaust gaskets that we had before. So let's get to drawing and chopping. This is like elementary school arts and crafts right here. Did I not just pick up the Sharpie? It's not in my hat. That's a typical place. It's not in my pockets. That's also a typical place I would put stuff. Oh, it's right there. All right. it had rolled. Now we got our pattern and cut this thing out, which is going to be super fun because I've got to figure out how to get in here with my scissors without messing up the metal. My bit exploded. Not ideal. Good thing there's enough of this material I could redo this a few times if I have to. And this is why you wear safety glasses in the shop. Till that thing goes through your face. That ought to keep it from moving, huh? Old, completely trashed eBay Turbo. It's like one of those really sweet plumbing videos where they like cut the circle with the angle grinder perfectly versus the guy that like goes in and just like straight line, straight line, straight line, straight line, straight line, straight line. Let's see if we can be the guy that cuts it perfectly. I doubt it though. But I do have a good bit of skill porting, so we'll see. It's a pretty good circle. So now here's the real question. Do I drill all of these holes so it has to line up on every hole, or do we cut some of them off and just use like 4 of the holes to index it? Probably ought to try to use all of them. Wish I had some way to like punch these out though, instead of obviously this does well for these long runs, but not for the short ones. So you know, like you're supposed to put the round peg in the square hole, or the square hole in the round peg. Well, I just made square holes because this cuts straight lines and that should fit. Fresh exhaust gasket on. Now it's time to fight this header again. Place your bets in the comments below. Does the header get installed or not? It's like betting on WWE. Who wins? Albeit you guys already know because you saw that we're gonna drive this thing. And that's why you're watching the video. Because we want to drive it. We don't want to look at it. And I don't want to clickbait you guys into saying that I drove it. Why couldn't it have came off that easy? Just went right in there. Look at that. The moment we've all been waiting for this whole video, back inside the yellow car. Whenever I fire this up, is it going to sound atrocious, or is it going to sound ideally quiet, like my now old man preference of not super loud vehicles most of the time is? It's an RX8. It's going to fire right up. Oh yeah. That's what we want to hear right there. Still might have. Oh, I don't hear an exhaust leak. Something's hitting something. Okay, it died. Dumb ground wire. Look, can you see him going nuts? Oh, it quit finally. Okay, ground wire, and then we go drive it. Hopefully it figures out its idle on its own and I don't have to help it. Still has the put it in gear, idle up, and it died. So I was gonna say is it still has the idle up whenever I put it in gear. I verified everything's plugged in on the transmission, which would cause that, so something's obviously wrong there. Something's rattling a little bit, but the catback exhaust is super close to the subframe, and always has been, but it is rubbing now. Look at that, we're driving a hybrid RX8 on the road. Nobody would have ever thought that this would have ever happened. I think I might have to put another dent in my header, or like just take that cross brace off, because my header's really close to it, and when the engine wiggles on the engine mounts, I can definitely tell that it's like rubbing that. Sick. So I'm keeping it running with my foot, guys. I'm not gonna let this thing die. Hey, look at this. We have a running hybrid car. It honestly sounds a little interesting. Yeah, the header's definitely hitting. It does sound a little bit interesting though. It's not quite as like, it's not quite RX80, but it's not quite RX70. I don't know. Maybe it's the Bumper Melter 9000 that's doing it, but something, it sounds different, right? Like, different is good. So literally, this is the first drive, guys. The first drive, besides whenever I backed it out of the shop and then thought I wasn't gonna get it done in time to be able to get a video up for you guys. But it's done now. We're driving, we're on the road. We've officially driven it. The video's not entirely clickbait, albeit, you know, it does feel good. All right, guys, so straight up, what has been your guys' biggest, just like, question, hiccup, thing that prevents you from wanting to do the hybrid engine? Like, drop in the comments below. What don't you like about it? What do you think isn't gonna do well? Literally, the very next videos, we're gonna be taking this thing to the dyno, buttoning the last bits of it up after the break-in, and then just putting it on the dyno and ripping it. So let me know in the comments below, like, why do you think nobody ever does it? Why do you think no one's pushed through to get, you know, to where I'm at right here, driving a hybrid powered RX8? Why do you think people just give up or don't post their data? Do you think it's gonna be worth it? Do you think it's not gonna be worth it? You know, obviously, like, at 4,000 RPM, I would say it feels maybe a little bit peppier than an RX8, but it's not that much crazier as far as, like, you know, we're going from 150 horsepower to we're ideally going to be making like 200. So, but dyno, like, you're going to feel that a little bit, but not too crazy. I don't know. Drop in the comments below. What do you think? Why you would or wouldn't do it? I don't know. Or why it's not worth it. I want to hear your guys' opinions. Good, bad, the ugly. Tell me all of it. So with that, that is going to be the end of this video. We officially drove the hybrid. It sounds pretty weird, but that's okay. We're going to take it to the dyno. Literally, you guys are watching this, we're probably already on the dyno. So I'm trying to hit regular scheduled uploads Tuesdays and Fridays. Just make sure I get a video out every Tuesday and Friday, which means the videos are going to get ahead of what's actually happening, but that's okay, because then sometimes it's going to be where I'm going to be behind. So we're just doing the thing, okay? So let me know what you guys think. Comments below. We're gonna go check out some RX8 port timing stuff here, because I thought I was gonna, you know, not make it, and I found the parts I needed to fix it, as you guys saw. So let's go check out the port timing stuff, and then that'll be the end. Thank you guys again so much for watching. I hope you learned something in this next little segment. We'll do the old typical exhaust sound clip video. I'll put y'all on the ground behind the car. I'm totally gonna have to set the idle up so it braps like that, because that was me holding the throttle pedal open a little bit just to get the braps going. Good old yellow buzz. Peace, guys. So over here at the bench, I've got a pretty trick little setup for you guys so that I can show you how the exhaust port timing works in this rotary engine in relation to why I went with an equal length header instead of doing something with varying lengths or just a log manifold. So this is a housing, an iron, a rotor, an E-shaft. I've got a front cover on this with just an old school 13B pulley. So don't get too lost in the weeds. This is not going to be that detailed, and I promise you're going to be able to understand it. One thing that's hugely misunderstood about rotary engines is that the rotor itself spins at a 1-to-1 rate with the E-shaft. What actually happens is that the E-shaft will make 3 rotations before the rotor actually spins 1 full rotation inside of the engine. As much as we think rotaries spin really fast, the rotors themselves spin fairly slow. Down here on this side of the engine are our exhaust ports, a peripheral port from the RX7 right here, and the side ports from the RX8 in the side of the iron. They open at different times based off of where the rotor is in its rotation, the port timing, right? So as I spin this, you're going to see the E-shaft is going to rotate. That was 1 full E-shaft revolution right there. So I'll do 1 more full E-shaft revolution. And you can see every full E-shaft revolution, just 1 apex seal moves from right here to the top. And then rotate it again, and it moves from here to there. So fairly simple, fairly slow rotor speed, fairly easy to understand. So we're going to put this engine at what we call top dead center, which is going to be 1 face of the rotor perfectly flat on the side where the spark plug's at. At the front pulley, so I marked on this with some tape. It's just very rudimentary. Top dead center is right here. So as the engine rotates, you're going to see I then marked on the tape there when that combustion chamber that was just at top dead center, when the first exhaust port opens up. And you can see right there, the RX7 port opens first. And looking down in here, you're going to see barely peeking some light through in that peripheral port right there. But if I put this in the RX8 port, I mean, you can barely see it because the engine's on it. The engine is not assembled, but you can see no light coming through just yet. So now let's rotate this to where the RX8 port opens. Now you can see that the RX7 port is massively open, and at the RX8 port, you can barely see that sliver of light under the rotor in there. The RX8 port has started to open up. So what does that mean for our exhaust? Basically, that means that there is going to be air coming out of the RX7 port first, and then coming out of the RX8 port per each combustion cycle. The center iron, where it has the combined port, the port timing is the same as the front and rear iron. So we'll just kind of omit that from the timing discussion for now. So looking at my header, each rotor's port is as close to equal length as we can make it. What that means is that the air from the RX7 port is going to come out of the collector first and then draw the air out of the RX8 port. Thus, hopefully enough time in between that there's some sort of scavenging to put a vacuum on those RX8 ports to then make them not be a hindrance to the exhaust flow. So that's really the ultimate goal behind my equal length header. Now, I don't know if equal length and that port timing and all of that is going to actually be the perfect concoction of delay and scavenge and how all of that works. So I'm sure that there's some more in-depth engineering that you guys could do on this, but I wanted to show you guys that, maybe a little bit more into the brain of me on this whole setup. In addition, y'all be asking, why is the center iron port combined way down here, completely separate from all the rest? Well, I actually want to run it like this. First time on the dyno, we're going to see what we get. I'm going to bring the car back home, and then we're going to do kind of like a header test, and I'm going to develop a couple different options for this header, and then we'll take it back to the dyno. So what I really want to do is I want to cut this off, make a section. So cut this thing off right here, weld this port closed. It's just simple. Do it for now. Let's see how it works. Put a small V-band on here so that I can add sections to it. We're going to put a V-band that seals this off completely solid so the exhaust gas doesn't come out. Ideally, that's enough of a tube that we don't see any weird back pressure stuff or really just see any weird carbon buildup in there, because people I've seen on hybrids where they just don't run the RX8 ports and only bolt on the RX7 ports. And then in addition, I want to make a piece of pipe that's actually longer and take this center iron port and run it all the way down past the merge of the 2 separate ports up here and connect it in back in front of the resonator. So those 2 options are things that I want to test, in addition to the comments you guys asked, we can build and I can test the stock manifold with some holes in it. So that's not going to be something that's going to happen 100% right away, but it will happen, in the next month or so as we go through, this car, getting the exhaust manifold gaskets put back on and getting it back running. So anyways, that is that. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe, drop a comment below with any questions. Bunch of other stuff is cooking. I haven't really quite decided yet exactly how to transition between this and the next project or how all that's going to go. And I don't know. We're driving. If you're interested in all the stuff going on behind the scenes, go check out the Patreon. Mad thanks to the support from the guys over there. Means the world. But with that, thanks for watching. Keep it rad. We'll see you in the next one. How about this, guys? Hawaiian shirt judge. I did rip my button, so then the bottom button doesn't button anymore. It's real unfortunate, but pretty pumped. Mid pipe looks good. Look at that. All nice with the resonator. It fits and comes off really well. The old 130 horsepower engine's chilling over here, which is mint. We did some wing stuff for the RX8s. Got the plasma table run. I think you all saw that in the last video. And I'm going to give you a little sneak peek of what I'm working on for the RX7. So there's a big event coming up for the RX7 and the green RX8 that we'll be prepping for once the hybrid content's all done. So with that, get stoked, guys. I'm going to keep ramping everything up. I want to keep seeing you guys watching the videos. Really appreciate all of you guys' support, and I can't wait to get this thing ripping. So with that, peace. We'll see you in the next one.